Wow. I'm sticking with the very last sentence and the reminder of the power that we hold belonging to the top 2%. And I really appreciate this session and the screening in Davos, because I think responsibility actually gives an angle, a holistic angle, because we're seeing so many talks now on AI and energy and very specific, but I think really the zooming into the responsibility of corporates gives us a holistic and broad view and really points to the core. And I think we saw that we still have a lot to do, and I think it pointed out a lot of urgency, but it also really showed that there are different ways of doing business, and we saw very inspiring role models. And later on this panel, I will introduce two panelists who also walk the talk and really do business differently. But I want to take a moment and introduce myself and actually explain to you what brought me here today. And my personal journey started actually 12 years ago. Graduating from high school, I joined a scale-up in Berlin, a fast-growing startup. And there was one similarity that I was reminded by the case of Tony's Chocolonely, because back in the day, the startup, it had a lot of unpaid interns. And we were growing fast, and every other day there were 5 new employees. And of course, we all know the story. A year later, the startup was sold for 8 digits. And I was wondering back in the days, how is it that this value was created, shared? It was a shared endeavor. Like all of the employees came every day bringing their hands and hearts to create this value. And in the end, there was the founders and some investors who profited. And that really got me thinking into how do we structure businesses and corporations? And how is it that a company can be sold like a pen, like a piece, although it's so many lives who depend on it and who create shared value? And yes, this is when I started wondering about, are there alternatives? How do we structure corporations and governance structures? And that's why I then started to do a PhD on alternative economic models. And for the last 8 years, I've been involved with the steward ownership movement that we will also speak about. So this is a bit my personal background. But now I see us all here in the afternoon in the cinema, relaxed and cozy. Maybe it's time for a little warm-up and like a mental, physical activation. So I might ask you to all stand up for a moment. Thank you so much. Yes, we have seen for corporates to be responsible, it also needs leaders who are responsible and take on responsibility. And so I was very curious in the room, now that we have everyone standing, who considers themselves to be a responsible leader? And I want, wonderful, and I want everyone who says they're not, maybe to sit down. And now we would go on a scale from 1 to, stay standing please, if you consider yourself responsible leaders, on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being perfect, super responsible decision-making always. If you consider yourself to be higher than a 5, please stay standing. The other ones sit down. We go up to a 6 and 7. Who thinks they are doing what is possible? And now I would introduce the panelists on stage. And it was just like a little warm-up and exercise to really wonder what is holding us back, like from being a 10. What is, maybe reflect for yourself for a moment, what is it that makes you irresponsible sometimes? Okay. So now I introduce Annina Menzi on stage. She's the co-founder of Purpose Schweiz. And Purpose Schweiz is promoting alternative ownership structures and solutions and more. You can sit down. Thank you so much. You can also stay standing. Alternative yes, governance structures and ownership structures. Maybe you want to continue and have a word.
It's already on? Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction. I continue sitting. So yes, my name is Annina. I'm a co-founder of Purpose Switzerland. We are part of a bigger movement, and we perfectly will dive into the topic actually what we are doing as Purpose, because we talk a lot about ownership and why and what we bring forward. I think we will entail afterwards when we are in discussion. But to say 1-2 sentences about me is like over a decade, I'm following the quest or the question, like how can we do business differently? And I think most of us in this room share this quest. And it brought me from the startup scene, like how can you bring an innovative idea into a successful business, to how can we form teams who work like collaboratively and on trust with each other. And my journey ended, it's not ending, but like currently I'm really diving into ownership, because it really brought me down on the fundament actually on what businesses are built on, like on the paper actually. And Purpose Switzerland, as I mentioned before, is part of a global movement. And we are like the competency center, the hub about steward ownership. And steward ownership is a concept diving into the realm of like how can businesses like be structured on an ownership level, that we actually don't have to dive into short-term profit maximization and really make room for long-term thinking, but more afterwards.
Thank you so much. And I also really appreciate, we have seen with Yvon Chidon, to really walk the talk. So you're not only promoting steward ownership, so you're also in steward owned yourself as your company. And we have here another very purpose-oriented and future-oriented and sustainable founder. Actually, Christian Kägi, he already 16 years ago built a very sustainable business, and they're doing sustainable products, cradle to cradle. Maybe you can introduce a little bit of also about your open source innovation about banana tax.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Good. Thanks. Yep. I have a background in product design in a holistic way, and what I would say, I'm a curious mind. I'm curious about several topics, and what I noticed is that pretty much all the products we consume today are designed in a way that don't have an end-of-life scenario. And that got me thinking and got my co-founders thinking, and we decided to create a platform to dive deep into supply chains and question how things are usually designed, made, used, to also consider their end of life. And that was basically the foundation of Question. And on that platform, we focused on everyday bags in a specific field, and quickly saw that the core issue was lying in the supply chain and the materials we were using. So the material is what either allows a product to be circular and go back into cycles or not. And so we heavily focused on material development. We decided to use plants instead of plastic as a foundation of our material developments. And through that journey over almost 17 years now, we created a material called banana tex, which is made from banana fibers, as the name implies, and it's fully circular. It comes from a regenerative ecosystem, and we decided to open that up to other brands as well. Instead of using that exclusively, we launched that in 2018, and since then other brands and companies like some of the big ones we all know, H&M, Balenciaga, and more, have been using it. And our idea with that was really to have as much impact as possible with what we had learned and share our learnings.
I love the learning sharing part, and also the role modeling, because I think it's so important that if we do business differently, that we also enable others and show and broadcast and actually hope that a lot of people will follow. So one question, maybe working in the steward ownership field, would be exactly that. How could we, Annina, make sure that Yvon Chouinard doesn't stay alone with his gifting away his for-profit into a non-profit for an environmental cause? And we've also seen in the audience the intention-action gaps. How can we incentivize more owners and founders to really hop on that train and really change?
So thank you for the big question. I think we all would need a little bit more of Yvon Chouinard in our world and in our companies. Honestly, when the first time I watched the movie, I was super excited because finally the story gets a little bit more portrayed of Patagonia, of Tony's Chocolonely, because those two companies have actually in common that they look at their ownership structures very intensely. So it was bumping with heart there. So, but answering your question, actually, what do we have to move? So I think there are several points we have to navigate and turn to get there. I would say one of the main points is actually the attitude behind being a leader. And what we specifically look at with steward ownership is actually what is the role of an owner, right? Because this is something most of the times, if it's not a question of you founded something and you build it up yourself, it's a question of entitlement, heritage, or money, right? So you have the right amounts of become an owner of a company or not, or you can heritage this position. Actually, this is how it normally goes nowadays. That how the ownership is passed on over generations, and we go there actually. And I told you, I warned you before. We talk a lot about ownership, so we go there and ask what's the role of an owner, and it's implied in the word actually that we want the owners to be stewards. What's a steward, right? It's acting responsible. What does responsible mean? And I think I looked it up, the term actually, and I found it fascinating because when we dive a little bit deeper into what's responsible, of course we understand it when we talk to each other, but the origin of the word, when we go into the Latin origin, it says re, it's back or again, and spondere means giving a pledge, doing a promise, right? So we redo a promise, simply said. And this, for me, it shows pretty nicely that it's a two-folded way. It's not just being responsible, you have to act on something, but it's seeing the cycle of you receive something and you're in the role, and they put it very nicely, you have the duty to give something back. And to see this cycle, I think this is common ground of how we perceive as well the stewardship role. Of course, there are many elements in it, being authentic, having long-term vision, being adaptive. It's a big term, but I really want to inspire leaders to step up there and follow role models as Yvon Chouinard. And this is, I think this starts with the human being itself. This switch, this can't be push the button, but you have to make the steps on this journey. Yeah, long answer.
Thank you so much. We touched upon so many things. So maybe last question from me, and then I would also invite the audience for questions. So you talked about taking ownership also means taking responsibility and really changing something. And so maybe I would ask you, Christian, when you made the choice for the circularity, how did this decision come about? What hurdles did you meet? Yes.
It's another big question. It was really driven by our intentions and the purpose we see for ourselves in the world we live in. And yes, we are part of the 2% mentioned in the movie as well, and we really see that as our responsibility as designer, but also doing business to take that responsibility head on and try to do the best we can. And I mean that may sound a bit blunt, or I don't know. It goes very deep into our structure, into our the way we work. We work in a very collaborative way, and that's all through the supply chain. I was really reminded by chocolate-only example of a lot of things we are pursuing as well. And I think it comes down to the fact that collaboration is what ultimately makes the world go round. We need more of that to tackle the big issue we are facing with climate change. We need global cooperation. We need global collaboration. And ultimately it's a collaboration, not just with people and human beings involved in our supply chains, but nature as well. We have to collaborate with nature to basically protect the foundations of life.
And also maybe one beautiful thing that Nicole said in the beginning about the latest WEF report, that actually the cost of inaction is becoming higher than the cost of acting, and companies are actually losing 7% of revenues annually because they're not acting. And so another thing would be maybe pricing of products. What happens if you take into account the true costs of your impact and footprint?
Yeah, I think that's a very important topic in the big picture. We currently have a system that allows companies to externalize costs, as we call it, and basically that's just pushing cost onto future generations or to the global south, very specifically. And we need to find ways to include that costs in the things we make, and that's has a lot to do with policies and regulation. The EU is pushing forward with new legislation on that front, which generally I'm positive towards. The danger, of course, is also to making it too complicated, especially for small companies. And actually getting to the root cause of the issues. And there, I think it's important to address the elephant in the room, which was also mentioned in the film briefly. But the petrochemical supply chain is a huge part of the externalization of cost today. And on that side, that was for us also the reason to say we're going to work with plants instead of plastics. The cost of taking that carbon out of the ground and bringing it out into nature is huge, and where the companies that are profiting most from it are not standing up for the true cost it creates. And yeah,
that's a big issue. Maybe I'm looking at the audience.
Well, Antonio, Young Global Compact Switzerland, thanks a lot. Also, the movie is again moving and seeing what Paul Polman has built up and now is being destroyed in these days. If you have seen the messages of Unilever going back the steps, it's really upsetting somehow. Annina, what you're doing, I think, is one of the core issues we have in our economic system. Because we have an economic system where investment and return on investment is the main purpose. Even though we say we want value-driven companies, if we go deeper into it, it remains difficult. And one thing, it's a question I have and I don't have the solution, is the consumer side. Because we are in this system where the consumer is telling the companies what they produce, whether we want or not. And if I see how companies explode, especially in China, exporting this trash produced with non-living wages, with fibers which are terrible. So the consumer side is booming, and I'm a little bit, how to say, asking myself, are we the guys here, the ones who are upholding the flag to maintain that? And what can we do to really make that the normal, that sustainability is part of the business models? And I'm even more now with the changes we see politically, I think we have to stand together to really push that forward and be convinced and keep the flag, because we are now going back a step, that's quite clear, but I'm hoping that then we get the new normal in a long run, but there are some risks that we will not succeed. How do you see that?
Maybe I want to quote one thing also we've seen in the movie. So if I think consumers have the ability to put pressure, like if consumers stop supporting unethical products and companies, they can lead to corporate changes. But what we also see is a huge problem that is inequality. So if people who cannot afford sustainable products, the sustainable lifestyle is very expensive, they're actually forced to act unethically. And I think that's, again, a systemic flaw that we also, if we look at global tipping points, really have to look into inequality. And if we look into inequality, we're again back at the ownership topic. So it's a whole chain of problems, of course.
Maybe I take over the question. Yes, there is not like one easy answer, of course, because otherwise we wouldn't sit here, right? But like first, I want to as well like hook in with what was said in the movie, the hope, because what we see is there is movement in how entrepreneurs want to run their businesses. And this is, of course, what we see, and it's not the whole spectrum, but there is something which is on the move and who really look at like we are hearing from the supply chains, but as well like going into the depth of the ownership structures actually. How can we do this differently? That when we do a company, it actually really, all the energy, all the actions, like from stakeholders, from customers, from employees, whatever, you name it, that all the energy which goes into a company stays with the company in a very positive sense of it goes into the purpose of a company. And this is what we see. And yes, it's not the mass yet. That's a fact. But I see movement there where we see people are drawn to authentic things, right? To like not just like beings, human beings, but as well organization who are aligned from the purpose, culture, and the structure. And this is something, I think Patagonia is a very nice example for this, that this like gives out the energy or like a signal as well to the market, which can be very interesting. Of course, we have the conflict of like the price, right? And I heard some time ago, I heard the quote like, everything in our culture has a price, but we forgot the value. And it's the point of like, how do we do pricing? It really comes down this rattle hole, right? Like, how can we show the value which is behind the true value and make it, visible as well? Half answer.
Maybe I can pick up there in terms of product. I think what we are facing is a disparity between, or a gap between the things we use. Let's take this as an example. A simple thing as a glass of water. We don't know how this is made. We don't know where the material comes from. We don't know what techniques go into it, what the harm may be, what the end of life of this exactly looks like. And I think that disconnection has been caused by industrialization and globalization, and it's taking value out of the perception of the goods we buy. And what we are trying with Question is to create a platform as well to show how things can be done, how they can be done differently, to kind of bring back that value into the products, because ultimately by going for circularity in a product and avoiding the waste at the end of the life of the product, we are internalizing cost into the product, which in today's marketplace makes it more expensive, and that basically creates a hurdle in the market. That element, I think we have to come to the systemic level where, as we mentioned before, the true cost of things should be represented. And I mean, there's a big issue there with the petrochemical supply chain, because if we look back to the Paris Agreement already, basically the United Nations agreed that we should stop subsidizing petrochemical supply chains. If we look at recent studies, what happened is it actually increased since then. And that adds to that disruption of the market, basically. So I think that's a huge issue, and just realizing that, I think, helps us all to actually push for change on that level. But it's a systemic issue we need to
I would like to elaborate on this and to make even like a broader perspective, because when we talk about like how can we change corporate behavior, there's the market, there are the consumers who can put pressures on it or not. There are like different like positions, but from my point of view, or like as well, like what we are working for, we have the structure and the culture in a company, right? And we tend to talk a lot about culture, like how is the employee happy in his position? How can everything work together? But I always like to draw the picture of the structure is actually the container of a company. The culture is the content, and the products are the content, right? And interestingly is that ownership is the structure. And it's like the deep design of the deep design of our society as well. What is ownership? What are the rights coming along with ownership, right? So this is for me always in all the discussions I'm having, and yeah, a lot of ownership discussions, but a lot of discussions about this blind spot, because most of the people don't look at this level. We talk about consumers, we talk about prices, we talk about products, and this is more the tangible ones, right? But the intangible ones are, in my point of view, equally important, if not even more important, because they shape, let's put it like the scope of action of a company. Like how a company has defined their ownership structure is actually defining how they can act. And this is why we come from a steward ownership perspective, where self-determination is one of the keys, asset lock is a second key, where we really say, okay, we want a company actually being able to act responsible. What they do is another question, but that the structure is not a prevention of being responsible. And this is something I really want to underline here, that it's kind of a core code of our daily businesses. The ownership, we don't even realize it. Like to whom, like who has the power to vote and make decisions about something? Who are those people? Why do they get into those positions? And how does the money flow? Like the money power questions are very delicate. Let's put it like this.
Maybe bringing the deep design of companies back to the consumer question. I think they share one fundamental problem, and that is that it's not natural for us anymore to really engage in long-term thinking. So consumers are about instant gratification. I need that thing, so I'm going to buy it tomorrow. And companies as well. We've seen they don't need to avoid profits, but they just need to have a little bit less to be more sustainable. That could be a start. And that aligns to the consumer as well as to the corporates to really relearn or to be more patient, to really engage in long-term thinking and think about future generations and really think about the impact that our decisions have from a consumer side, from a business side. And really, I think it needs a new routing of like.
And maybe a very
patterns.
concrete example are like family-owned businesses. Like family businesses, like how they think about their businesses. Inherently, it's like long-term. It's over generations, right? It's not, we always talk about family businesses 2.0 when we talk about steward ownership, because it shouldn't be bound to a family or that it goes over blood that the person is in this role. But like this way of thinking that no matter what you do, it's implied in your action that this will have an impact on the future generations. And I think we as a culture we unlearned so much there. We forgot so much. Yeah.
May I say to that, I was yesterday in a meeting where we had the family businesses make 60% of the world companies. So the majority are family businesses, but still we are in the old concept.
Yeah, I would like to pick up on that. I think next to the structure, a very important element are the incentives of our system, and I mean that's inherent to capitalism. It's about accumulating capital, and that's the incentive that businesses are run by, no matter the ownership. So I think to add to that, we need to change the fundamental values by which we are creating businesses and creating business. And I mean, what's fully lacking on that vision is the life. I mean, it's as simple as that. But it's our current model is destroying the foundations of life, and we need to find ways to incorporate that and actually incentivize the responsibility we have towards life.
And as well, like two thoughts about that. Like first, like corporates or like businesses who actually live like long term and like they act on it, they shouldn't be punished, because this is what happens at the moment with incentives, that if you go this path, it's not really easy. Not just because of the pricing and all those parts, but like it's like even from the tax authorities, like there are so many levels where this kind of like doing business like in this way, it's not usual. And so all of us have to unlearn and unpack this. And what the second thought I wanted to add is actually what we see a lot is this mechanism that power and money is coupled. So that as a shareholder, as an owner, you always have both. You have the power and you bought it through money, right? And decoupling this mechanism that, of course, the ones who are getting into power positions, they need the skills to be there. This is the most important thing, not the money, the skills. And the other thing is that the money, which is like produced by the company, should stay with the company. And this is, for me, this is like one of the ground mechanism how we can actually change the incentives. So as an owner, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you wouldn't have a double head on, like what's the best for the company and actually what's best money-wise, because I profit privately from the profit of the company, right? So it's biased. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other question?
Hi, my name is Torsten. Annina, I have a question to you, and I think it's great work you're doing. I would just be interested a bit in statistics and what you consider steward ownership systemic. So less the behavior from a cultural, more the structure around. Do you observe some sort of growing trend line that we see in more and more businesses? I don't know, growing by 10% in the last 10 years, 20, 30, or what portion of what we consider business is represented by this category you're defining?
I would love to have this number. There is no overall international number. What we know from, for example, from Denmark, this is actually one of the countries where we have a lot of steward-owned companies. Some of the bigger ones like Novo Nordisk, Carlsberg, they're actually steward-owned. And they do this through foundations, actually. And so, no, we don't have, it's not yet that good tracked. It's more, what I can tell you is that we started officially 2 years ago in Switzerland. The term steward ownership in Germany, like where the movement started actually like roughly 10 years ago, and where the term was coined in German Verantwortungseigentum. Since then, and I think this shows the movement, so many countries jumped in and said, hey, we need this here too. We want to raise awareness about how relevance is the ownership in how we do business and how we do long-term business. And so in the last year, 14 countries joined the movement to push it forward. So you see there is a lot of interest. The thing is that it's not yet tracked, but I would love to have this number. So we have a lot of super smart scientists behind, which are engaging in this matter and trying to make as well the scientific fundament for this movement true. And I think we are in this process. I hope next year, 2 years, we are better with those things. But thank you for the question.
Okay. Maybe at that, I'm observing two things in the market. First, there is a huge potential for actually family businesses because they suffer a lot because they struggle to have successors. So the only choice for family businesses without successors is actually to sell the company to the highest bidder, which is an erosion of the purpose, and to really enable independent self-owned companies in the succession field. There's a huge potential. On the other hand, newly founded businesses, so in the startup scene, it's just still very difficult with the funding. So we see impact investors still struggle to have a cap and paying back the shares. So we see this is a bit stagnant. So it needs a lot of awareness and education, and also just more capital in the funding of steward-owned businesses.
I think what a lot of people may not know is that one of the famous watch companies in Switzerland, Rolex, is actually with a steward ownership structure, which is really interesting to see how they work. And there are other great initiatives like B Corp, which was mentioned, that are pursuing a path to include a different purpose in the foundations of a company, which is also why we pursued the B Corp certification. And I think the fundamental element there is really to have in the foundation of the company to actually get the shareholders on board that the purpose of the company is not just for profit, but it's for the benefit of all. It's for planet, people, and profit, and that's really why I think B Corp is also offering a good platform to go forward.
Yeah, I think it's as well like one of the ways you can send a signal. Hey, we are doing this work, we are engaging, and it's making it visible. And one thought which just came up about the topic of shareholder, the shareholder notion. It's not that shareholder per se is something bad, but the point is actually about the absentee owners. Like, what is that when you're too far away of the company and you don't know, even feel the company, you don't know what they do, like you don't know actually the core of the business. So how can you actually make the right decisions for this business which is so far away? And this is a thing which we are not aware. So the point is how we live shareholder, like culture in that way. I think we actually can learn a lot about from our investors, from our shareholders, but it has to be on eye level, right? It doesn't have to put on the pressure, because what we see in a lot of startups is that how investment is done, it just fosters very risk positive behavior. So, which is not going hand in hand in what we just seen here. So, yeah.
One more question? Yes. Instead of a question, I would like to suggest to you, because I see a great work you are doing, and my organization and me have been leading this for last 25 years. So our finding is that the need of the sustainable development today is because there is a ratio mismatch between aspiration versus resources. So that element, I'm sure you must have brought in your design. Second, the problem of sustainability today is because of the flaws into architecture of the old model, which was based on the exploitation, and the new model which we must bring is based on empowerment. That element also, please add into your maximum whatever you can. It will solve a lot of problems, you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so true. Thank you so much for the impulse. And I think the point of, like, we are so much into this like notion of extraction, we don't always are aware of it actually. Even like in terms of in corporations themselves, like how the resources in a company, and I mean now here the money flows are extractively used. So it doesn't really go into the main core of the purpose of the company. So yeah, I think this is, thank you for bringing this topic up.
And another systemic thing I think that we have to consider about ownership is who are most of the owner. I think most of the owners of capital stock traded is actually pension funds, insurances. And do they really take on responsibility and take decisions that are good for the company, or are they actually the only purpose that they have is profit maximization? And I think there's also a root cause, and maybe as a closing word, talking about responsibility, I think always needs like the citizen level, all of us, the 2%, and then the corporate level, and also we have a policy level. And one thing that is happening at the moment in Germany is that, and in other countries, is that there should be new legal forms that kind of bridge between non-profit and for-profit and build vehicles for really social enterprises, so that profits are there to be reinvested into the company's purpose. And I think there we also need more policy awareness, more boldness, more legal innovations that really encourage more sustainable ownership and business models.
In the Netherlands, they actually, some weeks ago, they got the green light for it. So we're curiously watching to the Netherlands at the moment.
So thank you very much that you came here for this very important meta-level discussion, despite the sun outside and all of the many other events. Yes, let's maybe stay in touch, make the purpose movement grow, circularity. And yes, I think one takeaway for me from the movie was it's very overwhelming because we have to do things on so many different levels, like from taxes, supply chains, so many struggles. But there are role models and we can do it, and we have to show and tell and walk the talk and spread the word. And thank you. Enjoy Davos. Thank you for great panelists. Thank you so much.